Iowa football's wide receiver room takes another hit. Yet another wideout gone to the transfer portal as starter Diante Vines has entered the fray of people wanting to leave the program, looking to leave the program. He's already got a few offers from some D1 schools. We'll talk about Diante's decision and why I don't really think it's all that big of a deal to Iowa football. It may sound callous, but I'll explain myself in a second. But first, I want to tell you about Ascent Nutrition and this new product they've got, their spruce soap bar. This stuff is great, folks. It's made with organic oils, spruce tips, clay. It's all great. Check it out. It's a brand new product from Ascent Nutrition. Visit goascentnutrition.com. This stuff will not only make your skin look better, especially this time of year in the cold, dry winter, it will also help the strength of your hair follicles and leave your skin feeling fresh, clean, smooth, and alive with the awesome spruce forest scent. Visit goascentnutrition.com and use the code Hawkeyes for 15% off your total order. Again, that's the code Hawkeyes at goascentnutrition.com for 15% off your order. So Diante Vines has entered the portal last week, has already reportedly received offers from Pitt, UConn, UMass, and Old Dominion. Do you note a common theme with those four schools? I will be shocked if Diante Vines, who's known to be a mama's boy, does not end up back east. And there's nothing wrong with being a mama's boy, but that's been widely publicized. In fact, one thing I asked Diante about during last fall's media days, or media day in Iowa City, I asked him about him being the only wide receiver that did not travel with Cade McNamara and the other wideouts out to California for that offensive skill position trip that they took. And, maybe we make too big of a deal out of those trips and the camaraderie and the chemistry that players build, but I don't know that that's the case. I did think it was odd at the time that Diante didn't take that trip out west, and instead he went out east to visit his mom, and kudos to him. He's obviously really close to his mom, and he talked about how important it is that he keep that relationship strong with his mom, which you have to respect. But my point is, there was talk last year, prior to the end of last season, that Diante Vines would be entering the portal. And I was told on pretty good authority that sounded like mom really didn't want him to enter the portal, wanted him to stick it out. And now he has entered the portal, and he's got offers from schools out east. It was interesting the other day. I had Brad Heinrichs on from the Swarm, and he talked about how a lot of players from P5 schools nationally already have an idea of where they're going to be headed before they even enter the transfer portal. Why? Well, there's a lot of tampering going on, whether you want to call it the definition of tampering or not, whether it fits the bill. It's not like the NCAA is enforcing or monitoring this stuff anyways. I'm not saying that Diante Vines was tampered with, but I noticed a lot of these Iowa athletes, as soon as they hit the portal, these schools are offering. And some major schools, Pitt's a Power 5 school, so that's significant. And I don't know that he'll end up at Pitt, but UConn, he's from Connecticut originally, so would not be surprised if he ends up going to UConn. Have not heard about visits, but I'm guessing he's already taken some visits. These kids are getting on visits quickly. You got coaches flying in to see these athletes like as soon as they hit the portal. So there's no time wasted with the transfer portal window. And Vines did start much of the year. Frankly, he really didn't give Iowa a lot of offensive explosion. Now, I'm certainly not going to blame Diante Vines for that completely. I do think, I've talked about this many a time, that the Iowa offense led by Brian Ferentz just does not give wide receivers much of a chance to shine. And Vines ends his career at Iowa with just over 225 yards for his career. This year had 134 yards on just 12 catches, slightly over 11 yards per catch, which is pretty good. One touchdown, and struggled with injuries while I was here. Had a wrist injury that took him out of fall camp a year ago, and then was banged up this year. Gave Kaleb Brown, the Ohio State transfer, an opportunity to shine, and I think Kaleb kind of took his spot by the end of the year. So I am not at all surprised by this decision by Diante Vines to leave. I wish him the best. He seemed like a good kid. When I've had conversations with him, he's seemed very upbeat, positive young man who obviously cares a lot about his family. And he does have some talent. There's no question. He's got some athleticism, listed at around 6 foot, 195 pounds. And so you never know. Maybe he'll go off to a Pitt or a UMass and be really, really good. Would it shock me? No, not really. Would it also shock me if he goes somewhere and doesn't really do much of anything? No, that wouldn't shock me either. Hard to really evaluate receivers based on what they do in this system. Just look at Charlie Jones and what happened when he got to Purdue is a perfect example of that. But Keegan Johnson has struggled down at Kansas State this year. He's dealt with some injuries too, and maybe he'll catch on next year. But it's just hard to tell, hard to evaluate. But obviously, an ACC school in Pitt saw something in Diante on tape to give him an offer pretty early in the process. As it relates to Iowa's roster and depth heading into next season, well, first of all, this means that Vines will not be participating in the bowl game. If you consider what Kirk Ferentz did with transfers a year ago, first of all, oftentimes these transfers who are leaving and entering the portal during the December window, they're not even with the team anymore. Once they enter the portal, they're done. Now, the exception has been, with Kirk Ferentz at least last year, with graduates. So, for instance, Dallas Creative did play in the bowl game after entering the portal. Diante Vines, probably not the case with him. I do not believe that Diante has graduated. And same with Joey Labus, who we talked about the other day, having entered the portal. So my guess is Joe Labus and Diante Vines will be heading to other schools here soon, or at least heading back home. I'm guessing Diante Vines is probably already back in Connecticut, and I'm sure Joe Labus is back home as well. And so as it relates to the bowl game, you hope to get Kaleb Brown, Seth Anderson. They're both healthy. We assume they're healthy. You'll get one final game out of super senior Nico Ragaini, and then a young guy in Jacob Bostic who played a little bit late in the year, struggled with injuries last year. He's going to have a chance. Remember, they've got 3 freshmen, and Dayton Howard, Alex Moda, and Jarrett Bowie. Any of those guys can play in the bowl game and not burn their freshman eligibility. So maybe we'll get a glimpse of one of those guys. They brought in all 3 last year. None of them have entered the portal during this cycle thus far. Next year, Iowa has Reese Vanderzee, the big 6'5" Iowa wide receiver out of Rock Rapids, coming in. He's listed at 6'5", 190 out of high school. Then KJ Parker, who's a smaller receiver at 5'11", 165, who's coming in as more of a slot guy. He's another 3-star who will be coming in next year. So there should be a lot of open competition. They are bringing in Jalen Watson. We had him on the show the other day. Well, it's been maybe a month ago, actually. But he's coming in as a DB. Make that clear. He's coming in, even though he played a lot of receiver in high school, he's coming in as a cornerback. So there should be a lot of healthy competition. I would expect the 3 guys at the bowl game to be Ragaini, Brown, and Anderson. And then you're probably going to get some run from Bostic, maybe a younger player. And then moving forward, I think the biggest priority in the transfer portal cycle right now is keeping Kaleb Brown and Seth Anderson, especially Kaleb Brown. I think he's the most talented receiver Iowa's had. Some of that's still very raw. Do I think it needs to be developed? Absolutely. Am I real confident in this staff developing that talent? No, not really. But still, that needs to be number one priority from a personnel standpoint with your wideouts, is figuring out a way to keep Kaleb Brown here. Sounds like that's probably going to happen. Certainly, NIL had something to do with him coming here, so I'm guessing it will have something to do with him staying here as well, assuming he does. One other thing that Brad mentioned on a recent show is he's just speculating, of course, but he was talking about, the possibility that Kirk Ferentz hires a new OC that wants to bring some coaches with him. Perhaps he wants to bring his wide receivers coach with him. Perhaps he wants to bring his offensive line coach with him. Not saying Kirk would part ways with Kelton Copeland, George Barnett, but what types of drastic measures is Kirk willing to make, if any, as it relates to the new OC hire? And if that's the case, then it's even more important that you hold on to some of these guys with raw talent in hopes that you can get somebody who can really get the most out of these young guys and develop these kids at Iowa. So all those are storylines. I don't expect a hire to be announced with the OC position until at least after the bowl game in January. We'll continue to keep you posted right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm. More portal coverage and men's and women's basketball coverage coming. Keep it locked right here from the Hawkeye of the Storm.